Back roads in many parts of Europe are actually not as good as Indian roads, which is something quite funny to the Westerners that I sometimes ride with who have never been to India, and they ask about things like roads and stuff like that. I tell them actually we ride on better roads, and they don't believe me. But when they come, they realize because we have some actually, when the surface is good, it's phenomenal.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have that that slightly broken chip seal, which is a little rough, B brutal on tires. So I've learned never to ride fancy tires, the kind of fancy tires you can use here, like a Vittoria Corsa or something like that. I wouldn't dream of using outside of a race. You realize when you cycle in different parts of the world, you also start to notice that people are built a little differently. Like, riding in Spain, I've been lucky enough to ride in Spain, southern France, Italy, etc. And those parts, you often see the riders are lean and whippy because they have big climbs. A lot of your training is like a big climb, 7, 10, 15, even 20 kilometers. Those giants. You need to be small. And then you go to Northern Europe, and even the very good cyclists are big men, really big man and women. And then you realize that size matters for two things. One is that, like, the short climbs, which is typical of a lot of the terrain, or in when you're cycling in Northern Europe, no climbs but brutal wind. It's the raw power that you develop as opposed to watts per kilo that matter. Many of us work can be horribly demanding, and in many cases that's the one that can easily gobble up everything else. And it's important to just have some sense of where you can draw a boundary, and it wouldn't be the same for everybody. Obviously, there's no one size fits all, and you have to think a little bit about what works best for you. The only good news I can give you is that if you're willing to make that commitment, you will find the time to ride, you will find the time to have fun, and you'll get your work done. It's just believe it's possible.
I am Vicki, and this is the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, time management, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future episodes. Today's guest, Menon, is a dear friend and a long-time cycling teammate of mine. He's also been a runner for more than 4 decades. In this episode, we talked about his running and cycling journeys over the years. And as someone who has cycled and raced in various parts of the world, and as someone who has been living and racing in Dublin for the last couple of years, he shared pretty interesting insights into the club level riding and racing there. It was interesting to note them and trying to contrast them with the situation in our part of the world in the intent of learning from them and probably implement a few things here. I really enjoyed this conversation with Hari. Now let us get into the conversation. Hari, welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you here. So, as I was telling you, uh, my first episode was with Arvind, and then second was with Vicki. And a funny incident at that time was I was so nervous while starting that podcast and talking to Vicki, of all people.
I'm sure she'll find that funny.
Yeah. So, and I was nervous, fumbling, and all that. She said, Venki, calm down. It's just us. We're friends. And let's start the session with a bit of meditation. So, uh, none of this anyone would know because I edited that out. We were doing that on Zoom. We were in the lockdown and all that, right? And she made me do a meditation for a couple of minutes, and boy, after that we had a blast. So she was, she is into leadership, consulting and all that, and it was evident, how she can handle a situation like that and help people, you know, get out of their shells, right? So, and here we are. Sitting after 70 more episodes
Hmm.
and talking with you. It took a long time because I didn't want to uh, do it remote, and I wanted to be, face to face with you and do this in person. As you are here now visiting from Dublin, here we are.
Yeah, it's nice to be here and not 8,500 kilometers away. But the it's interesting that you started off with something like mentioning the meditation, because she, Vicky, of course, works as a coach, and works in a different field, but also extracting high performance from talented individuals, and able to, as good coaches do, opening the doors for them to really excel in the way that they can best do, which in many ways, you've done, and over the years that I've known you, which we can talk about a little later. I've seen you do that for so many people. So it's interesting that she was able to do it for you, which
Yeah.
is a lovely way to pass it back.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And okay, let us start also, by talking about what is work for you right now.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, I have done all kinds of things. A quick summary. We'll
Yeah.
we'll get back to the cycling and
Yes.
running part,
Yeah.
but I have done literally everything from rural development to investment banking to working in the stock market to fashion journalism to financial journalism and corporate journalism. The last financial journalism is what I did for a very long time. Now I do something utterly different. I actually work in a company that my wife Vicki had set up in Dublin, which also works in leadership development and high-end executive coaching. And I actually do uh, the work of a producer, because a lot of our work now, once the pandemic has started, has moved online, and we work with global teams from all over the world. And by global, I mean each of the teams is also comprised of people from all over with varying backgrounds.
Right.
Um, and working on various aspects of their development. These are all people who their companies have identified as people to be on the fast track, who have potential, who might, who knows, be leading that organization or other organizations within the next few years.
Right.
So high potential people. It's quite humbling to be someone managing the entire technology and information backup for all these people, and realizing, okay, maybe you're the dumbest person in the room, but you still have something to contribute, which I love.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I work as you could call it as a producer and editor and business developer. It's a small company, so you end up wearing multiple hats
Right.
for this consulting firm.
Great, great. And the kind of work you have done over the years, wearing so many different hats in so many different ways, is amazing as well. You bring in a lot of experience from all those years in also what you do right now, I guess, right? And coming into the athletic part of it, right? I gather that you have been running for the last 40 years.
Probably more. I think you saw our common friend shares his post, I think, on
Yeah.
Facebook. Yeah, I just threw that number out. But see, I'm 55, and I have been running off and on since 12, so maybe a little
Yeah,
longer
longer.
than yeah, longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was a moderate to decent runner in school. I got a bit better in college. Around that time, I got what was then a fairly fancy, well, relatively fancy bicycle in we're talking about the 1980s in India.
Right.
So any bike with gears was fancy.
Correct.
But this is an unusual one because it is a steel 1956 Raleigh
Wow.
with a 3-speed Sturmey Archer hub gear,
Wow.
which is really interesting. Nobody could repair it, so you learn a lot of things about the bike. But anyway, I digress. But the thing is, I've been running or cycling since I was quite young, and both these things have been uh, I've done them, yes, a little bit competitively, but they have also been, they have offered for me the same place that a meditation or a good yoga practice or or just even just relaxing with a good book, that kind of escapism, but in a nice way. I use the word escapism and relaxation, and this is where this is my happy place. Fortunately, and this is the thing, I consider myself really lucky. 40 years or 43 years or whatever it has been, it has remained mostly a happy place, except when I fall off the bike. But that is another story.
Correct. No, that is beautiful. That speaks a lot about the longevity that you have in the sport. Also, the kind of approach that you take uh, for sport, as in it is something that gives you that happiness. It is something that takes you to that happy place, and not something that you strive to perform or something like that, which you obviously do, but the main intent is to just do it for the love of it.
Yeah, I will say that one of the perspectives of having done something for so many years is that you do different things. Definitely, you do different things at different ages. I wish, I have often wished, for example, that if we had the sort of same infrastructure of regular events, and not just for elite athletes, but just for regular amateur athletes. If we had the same sort of regular events that, for example, you do with amateur racing, and then the BBCH racing that the committee does, and a few others in India on the cycling scene, and many in running. I wish those things had been there in my teens and 20s, because apart from the fact that I was much stronger and faster, I realized that the teenager and the 20-something person that I was also more competitive and a little more aggressive in these things.
Right.
I find that, after about 20, 30 years of doing something, I will, and since you've cycled with me a lot, you will have noticed this,
Right.
that I actually don't get too competitive in a race.
Yeah.
But if you tell me to chase a number, I might turn myself inside out to do it.
Right.
For me, it's when I was younger, I could look at a person and say, I want to beat this person,
Yeah.
which is what you need to do in a race. I mean, it sounds
Correct.
cruel, but that is what you have to do. I mean,
Yeah.
like in a time trial, you see a couple of people in front of you and you hunt them down ruthlessly.
Yeah.
I had that. As I've grown older, it's become less and less. At least I can still see in the bike, I can see, okay, speed, watts per kilo, and I'll chase that.
Right.
But I almost feel like, no, I don't want to chase that fellow down. Let him have his win.
Right.
It's what we used to joke. I lived many years in the north,
Yeah.
and there's a term for it. It's called that pehle aap, pehle aap syndrome, which is it's very polite and all, but maybe not in racing.
Exactly. But let us go back, like you were mentioning, back in the days, in you're running in schools and colleges, right? How was it back then? What kind of events did you do, and what kind of
Okay, we were lucky in the sense that I went to a boarding school in northern India, in a town called Dehradun, which is now a big city. It's much more built up. But when I was there in the late 70s, early 80s, there was still a lot of open space around that. And the school had been set up by Indians, but like with a few Englishmen who brought this concept called cross-country running in. And it used to be a big event there. They weren't long because we were still kids. The longest, it was normally a 5K, 5 kilometer race, and then it got extended to an 8 kilometer race by the time I did my 12th. And you went through all kinds of terrain. It's just like a proper off-road race. I was fairly good at that. I really liked it. And then I got into road running. And then we didn't have any super long events because they tend to discourage you from doing very long events, at least in those days when you were young.
Yeah.
Now, I believe with the right kind of support and training and supervision, we know so much more in sports science today. You can actually judge how much a young athlete can or cannot do.
Right.
I was super lucky because my English teacher for my 11th and 12th was a guy called Dev Lahiri. He died a couple of years ago, but he was a Rhodes Scholar, and studied at St. Stephen's in Delhi and in Oxford University. And in both places, he was an outstanding runner. And these are both places that, where, for example, if you're on the Oxford University team, you're often, you're running with GB marathoners and stuff like that. And this man was an outstanding. He was in the top 4 or 5 marathoners in the country at that time. He was also my English teacher. This is a blessing. He was reasonably fond of me. I don't think he thought I was such a good runner, because there were better people. But he was a fantastic person to have around, because he encouraged me and made me believe, because at that age, often it is a question of one person. Teenage is a difficult time anyway. As a dad, you totally know this. And sometimes all it takes is, you may resist everything, but all it takes is one person to say, try this out, and someone that you respect, and you will try it out, and you discover it's wonderful. And and I'm glad, because in a sense he gave me a gift that has sustained me through miserable times, good times, everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
So just the exposure is the point I'm trying to make. When you're young, or even when you're older, but at any time that you're reasonably receptive, just the exposure to someone who's an elite athlete and is willing to share some of the knowledge and wisdom, and also funny stories, because there are many, that really draws you into a sport. It's priceless.
That's how you got into running, I guess. Right. So how was it from there, from school days, when you got to college, and all that? How did that progress, the sport?
Yeah, the sport was complicated in the sense that, like, I went to a pretty good engineering college, BITS Pilani, which is it's still ranked, considered a fairly good place in India. Now the thing is, of course, you go to a place like that. Yes, lots of people have fun when you go to these kind of colleges, but ultimately it is about a degree and the serious pursuit of a degree. And those of us who have fun, well, we try and fit in whatever we can. And I was, of course, the extreme end, who barely studied and did literally everything else. Played a fair bit of sport there. And then I was a lot into other sports there. Played a lot of hockey, played a lot of squash. Squash is actually the thing that I loved the most at that time. And it kept me, for the fitness, I said, I used to run not bad, so let me try running again. And then I discovered I was reasonably fast. There's a couple of other guys who were genuinely good as well. And so we used to often run together. And we used to have one event called the, I think it's, whatever, the college cross country, open cross country. It is, Pilani is a town on the edge of the desert in north, it would be due west of 200 kilometers due west of Delhi. So it's a sort of desert and sand dunes around the campus. Now it's all fully built up, but in those days it was mostly desert. And there was a 4.5-5 kilometer cross country run that used to happen, and I actually managed to win that. And for a while I think I had the record. At which point I realized, okay, this could be good. And because it was close to Delhi, I'd go and sort of meet some family friends. And there was another family friend who was again a big mentor, a man called Ranjit Bhatia, who died some years ago. He was an exceptionally good marathoner. He ran the 5,000 and the marathon for India in the 1960 Rome Olympics. And again, an ex-Oxford guy. And when he was at Oxford, he had actually beaten people who've won medals in the Olympics. I mean, that level.
Right.
And then he was also another person who's very fond of me and, like, very encouraging. Now, the irony here is being so close and having access to people who are very much part of the athletic scene is that I got to go to a lot of these events, and then saw that at that time, say I was about 20, 21, I saw what my level was. At that time, I had just got under 16 minutes, so high 15s, mid 15s for a 5 kilometer, which is fast, but only by amateur standards. You wanted to be anywhere, you had to do it in 14, and, like, the best people in the world at that time, to world class at that time, was the early 13s. Now it's less than 13.
Right.
But to be India standard, you have to be 14, just under 14. So that's a minute. That's basically you're one lap behind the guys who are competitive.
Right.
And I said, like, athletics is not my life. I mean, I have this whole, career to think about. And to be fair, I was 21 years old. I was having a lot of fun. There were girls, parties, studies also of some sort.
Some studies here and there.
Theater. I was heavy into quizzing. So, I was very, I was traveling all over the place to do quizzes and stuff like that.
Wow.
So these other things sort of distracted me a little bit from running. But that is about as good as I ever got as a runner. But the thing was, because of the exposure, and we can come back to this, and we've actually talked about this in the past with some of our Spectrum teammates also. Something that, say, our friend Rajesh often brings up, that if you see the quality of the people who are really good, it works two ways. One is that it can inspire you. The other is it can also bring a reality injection and realize, okay, these guys are at a different level. I'll never be there. So why am I even going to waste my time doing that? For example, in cycling, we do that sometimes. When we were cycling in Italy, you see a good guy like us would ride at, say, 4 watts a kilo. If they train well, 4.5 watts a kilo, and which we know with the correct kind of training is achievable. Then you see a guy you kind of know who's kind of good, and you see they're riding at 5. And you say, okay, they're good, but at least when they're riding a easy ride, you can ride with them. And then you see the 6 watts per kilo guys. And you say, Bhagwan, this is another planet. And when that another planet thing happens in your head, then, it can be both discouraging and encouraging. In my case, it was, okay, I'll just from now on and probably do this for fun. But I'll do all kinds of other things.
Right.
So
that is also important, right? To kind of understand where does it fit with our other priorities in life.
Very much.
Right. It mattered then, and it matters now as well. When we talk about chasing a goal, it happens so much in the mammals. Right, for us who took sport not as kids but as
later on,
later on in life, we get so enthusiastic and enamored with all this craziness, and sometimes lose track of other things in life that matter more. Right, this is not going to pay you. Right, we started doing this probably for health reasons. In my case, to losing weight and stuff like that, and trying to get healthy, right? And as a hobby, good healthy hobby. And then we get into all sorts of chasing goals, and we some of us take it to extreme that it could affect other areas of our life.
Absolutely.
So that is important. That kind of reality check is, from time to time, even if you don't get to see those, you have to have that reality check in some way or the other to be grounded and
yes, you shouldn't let it consume you.
Exactly. So that kind of told you at that point of time that it is more I should probably take this as more recreational thing that I do by the side, but not as something that I chase professionally.
Yeah, and I knew enough about running at that time. This is of course long before internet days, but I was one of those guys who was motivated enough to find every foreign running mag that I could anywhere.
You were also into quizzing.
Yeah, so anyway you find out, and your head is full of all these facts. But even then you knew enough about training protocols and ability. We don't have the analysis, the depth of analysis and the math and the kind of information that we do now. But we knew enough to know that, if you're a certain level, yes, you can get this much better, but you cannot get that much better.
Right.
But the other thing was also a lot of guys that age and that era. I had also discovered things like cigarettes and alcohol, and which are not performance enhancing at all. In fact, that one of the reasons, although I never really stopped running or cycling, I would say the next 20 years, I never stopped smoking. For a while, I was quite a heavy smoker. Got up, in fact, there were some phases of maybe 5-6 years at a stretch where I might have hit almost 60 a day, which is like chain smoking, and partying and drinking and stuff like that. Now the thing is, I know that we're taking the conversation slightly away from where you wanted it to go, but I think it's probably a relevant thing for many people.
Definitely.
Is that for most of us, unless you have an existing pre-existing health condition or some kind of serious problem, your body at 20, 30, maybe if you're lucky, even very early 40s, your body is actually pretty indestructible. It is tough. You can hammer it with bad food, alcohol, cigarettes, this, that, pollution, anything. And you can still recover if you're doing other things. You're getting decent sleep and you're exercising. But there is a price to pay and it sort of builds up. And once you cross a certain age, I mean, for me, it was maybe my mid-30s. It was not possible to do. You couldn't burn the candle at both ends.
Right. So that is when you stopped smoking?
I quit actually at maybe 42. Yeah, 41.
Okay.
So that was 2008. And 2007, I'd sort of really let the running and cycling slip to the extent where I was just sort of, I could run a little bit, I could cycle fairly comfortably, but I was not doing anything major, maybe 20-kilometer bike rides. Run, I'd actually stopped for a while. And then I went to, I was staying in Kerala at that time, and I went to a municipal track to try and run to restart after 3-4 years. Not 3-4, maybe 2 years. And I ran 800 meters. That is 2 rounds of the 400-meter track. And one gentleman, an elderly gentleman wearing a mundu veshti, that cloth, a traditional Kerala dress, barefoot, he overtook me. and I was finished after 800 meters. And I said, like, my God, what's happened to you? I mean, here's a guy who could run competitively. You're running 18, 20, 30 kilometers for fun. And now 800 meters, you're dead and an old man has thrashed you.
Right.
That too wearing a mundu. So I thought, okay, let's do something about this. And from that time, 2007, for about a year, I really took it seriously. Quit the cigarettes. I was already eating fairly healthy. So that took care of itself. Cut down massively on drinking. Started cycling a bit later. And then something quite interesting happened. Which I think you will connect to nicely, because my sister sent me and forwarded me an email. I was at a bit of a loss to do, because at that time I was actually doing a lot of travel writing, freelance travel writing. I was based in Cochin and doing freelance travel writing, traveling all over India and writing about various places, slightly outdoorsy kind of things. So my sister sent me something saying that some guys in Bangalore are organizing this multi-day tour of various places in South India. I think they're going to Ooty and what is it, Coorg and a few other places. Would you be interested? It turned out that an ex-colleague of hers, this lady called Razana, her husband Rajesh was one of the people organizing this. Okay. And then of course it's funny to say this now, but because these are all people that we know of quite well in the cycling world. But she just said this ex-colleague of mine, her husband is one of the people, and there are a few other Bangalore guys organizing this. And this thing that they're talking about was a tour of the Nilgiris, the first edition. And yes, and then some people who had been writing for also picked up on this and said, Hari, this thing is there. Would you like to go and write on it? We can organize a car for you, so you follow them in the car. I was like, boss, these guys are cycling. Can I not also cycle? What is this car? Yeah. And I had a fairly inexpensive 6-speed mountain bike. So I wasn't very sure that would be enough, but I thought maybe I'll give it a go. And anyway, one thing led to another. My magazine got in touch with the Tour of the Nilgiris organizers, and they said yes. And they also said, no, we'll put him in the car and he can follow. Again, I went to them and said, no, this car business, no, I want to ride it. And then a couple of the others, Sridhar Pabisetti, Ravi Ranjan spoke to me, and then they asked me how much you've been riding, and I said 20-30 kilometers a day maximum. So they said, well, it's going to be considerably longer than that. Then they said, do you do anything else? I said I run quite a lot. I just run the Airtel Delhi half marathon. So they said okay, what was your time? So I told them. So he said, then no problem, come.
Okay. What was the time?
It was nothing great. It was 139 or something. But considering that I just come back to running, it was okay. Yeah. And anyway, they decided, okay, this is more than enough. This fellow can ride.
Yeah, you has the.
Yeah.
I think they figured you have the aerobic fitness.
Yeah. Yeah. And as it turned out, this is wonderful because it did several things at the same time. One is that I had not really explored, despite being South Indian, I'd mostly lived in bulk of my
north,
years in
yeah.
the north. Well, actually, the largest chunk in Bombay, little bit less in Delhi, little bit less in Calcutta, and then bits in Rajasthan and UP. So I hadn't really
All
lived in
over.
South India.
Yeah.
So and especially I had not explored South India. So this was phenomenal because at multiple levels, cycling, it introduced me to cycling and sort of reintroduced me to cycling and made me realize that I actually love going for these longish rides, and especially somewhere pretty. South India, that part of South India, no shortage of pretty. So, it is
Absolutely
absolutely,
gorgeous.
every bit of it is lovely, and you know well since you've done so much of it,
Yeah.
and multiple variations of the standard routes that we
Correct.
do. It's absolutely lovely, and the third thing that it did was introduce me to a wonderful community of cyclists of various levels. I mean, sadly, some of them, they got interested then, but like don't ride so much now, and others became more into cycling advocacy, which is also lovely. But then your paths don't cross if you're a more competitive rider.
Correct.
We sort of know each other, but like it was lovely to cycle with them even then.
Yeah.
But it certainly introduced me to a whole lot of people, some of whom have then evolved into very close friends and have remained so. And we still try hard to and we are spread all over the globe now, but we will still try and ride together somewhere.
Correct.
Now, what more can you say?
Absolutely. So the first time I saw you, I still remember to this day as if it was like yesterday, because it was the first time I saw you was in a lift.
I remember that.
In 2010 December. You guys were just back from tour of Nilgiris 2010. That was the third edition.
Third edition.
And I into the December 2010 I landed in Bangalore with a new job, and I knew about this tour because the tour has started in 2008, right around the time I got into cycling, and I was spending a lot of time on Bike Zone.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say, why don't you say a little bit about Bike Zone? Because
Yeah.
Bike Zone is the other thing that started us. Sadly, it's not there.
Yeah.
But for many of us, it is where the seed was planted.
Exactly. So, we were spending a lot of time on Bike Zone, and we actually knew each other there because, we were posting regularly on Bike Zone. I was posting, probably a 1,000 word post for a 10-kilometer ride or something like that. But, that.
It was more than 10 kilometers.
Yeah.
And some in Vermont was longer.
Yes. So it was there, and I came to because that's how I knew about the tour right around the time that I started cycling. And then when I landed in Bangalore with a new job, and I knew that the TFN was finishing, and I think through the Bike Zone I knew that this is where the
That's how you found out.
cold off party was happening and all that, and I landed there. No one obviously the
I had no idea. I just assumed you were part of the.
no, the cool off party is for the riders and their relatives, I guess, and I didn't know anything, so I just wanted to see, because from 2018, from the first edition, since I got into cycling around that time, I was really interested about that tour. And from the first edition, the article that came out, probably one of it was written by you.
One I had done for Outlook Traveler, which actually a lot of people saw. Yes.
Right. And then about 2009, people who came back and talked about it. It was very interesting. It was something of an aspirational tour for me. So I landed up there with the uninvited. I wanted to see, meet people who have done it and listen to their stories of their experiences, because I wanted to be there the year after. And I walked in. to, I think the South Indies was
That's the venue. Yeah.
that was the venue, and I walked into the lift and see you. I didn't know at that time. Obviously, I did not say anything, and then.
No, but we did say something, which is how I found out that you were the Bikey Venky from Bikeszone. And
Oh, is
yes,
it? I don't remember,
yeah.
but
I mean, it may not have been in the lift. I think we went up in the lift, but we did talk because I think you achieved one goal anyway because you met several people who were at least the bike zone people there, and then a few more.
Correct. So I got into the area, and everyone started sharing their experience of tour, and that is when I knew the names and I could connect the handles to the names and stuff like that.
Which is always lovely.
Yeah. And I thought I saw Amit there and you.
Of course, you would have. Yeah, he was there.
And a lot of others, and it was such a lovely, evening for me, so memorable for me. And of course, after that, we met and connected there, and then started riding. Figured that we are living relatively close by, and I think each other followed on Strava or somewhere, I don't know, but
Garmin in those days.
And then we planned our rides together and stuff.
I still remember some of those on the Hennu Road.
Correct.
I went there shortly before I left Bangalore 2 years ago. I did one of those rides. Same route. The road is the same. The surrounding is unrecognizable because it's changed. It's built up so much.
Wow. Yeah, it was changed so drastically. And was that the year that Vicki did? No, Vicki did on 2011.
She did it the one that the three of us did together. That was 2011, 2012.
Right.
Because she got into cycling. If I can share a funny story, anyway, she came to drop me at the start of the 2010 tour with the Nilgiris, and she had thought like this was like a sort of maybe more like a race oriented sort of thing, which at some level it has evolved to be. But then she saw such a wide spectrum of people who are all lined up at the start, and she looked at them and said, "Well, if they can do it, so can I," which is a lovely way of sort of looking at this. And then so I came back from TFN and I went to your namesake Venki of Wheel Sports and had bought her a bike, and she. Anyway, this podcast is about other things, but anyway, she started winning races enough that she said, "Okay, I'm going to do the tour with the Nilgiris as well." Yeah. It has been. I mean, I actually, if I can steer this into an interesting thing, it has been actually quite a wonderful experience being a couple that shares the same interests in the same sports.
Yeah.
Which is not everybody has that benefit, and I will I do know that some of my friends have struggled because there are cases of just spouses having different interests. We used to call them. I mean, I have a lot of friends who play golf, and they joke about the wives being golf widows, and it can be hard. And the thing is that, to be fair, not to laugh at this, but if one person in a household is going to take 4 or 5 hours out of every weekend morning, that's a commitment both for the person who's staying behind and for the person who's going out. And it can take a serious toll on a relationship. And these are things as we get older, we need to think about. And it has been phenomenal to have somebody who also likes doing these things. I mean, we do squabble about who has to run and who has to cycle and when. But other than that, just having somebody who's also a cyclist is actually a pretty good thing.
Right.
Plus that the other joke in cycling is that, you always lie to your spouse about, how many bikes you have and how much you spent on it. Now,
there is no chance.
It cannot happen. Anyway, she has better bikes than me.
Yeah. So, let's expand a little bit on that aspect, right? It is very, you guys met maybe in 2010 or something.
Yeah, 2010.
And you've been riding together and now actually running together since Vicki has taken interest in running as well.
Mainly for duathlons, but anyway.
Yeah. But how has it been over the it's and 12 years is not a small time
Fairly
frame,
long time. Yeah.
very long time. Um, in sport as well, right? And sport together. So what are some of the things that helped you guys doing the sport together?
One is a sort of mutual support has been really helpful. Another thing is like most places that we've been in. Uh, Obviously, the longest stretch here, but then riding. We spent the longest time in Spain and Barcelona for a while, and then like spent time in southern France, and then obviously in Ireland now where we live.
Mm.
And we've generally managed to find really nice people to ride with, and really nice is one thing, because good nice company in cycling means a lot of things, but mainly it means people who are sort of there's a comfort level, and there's also a compatible ability level, because that's important. I mean, even the nicest person is not going to help if they're so much better than you that you both feel that you're wasting each other's time.
Right.
And again, like in terms of being a cycling couple, one of the lucky compatibilities has been that, yeah, I'm slightly stronger than her, but she's probably far more determined than me, which means that like even on a hard ride, we'll never be very far away from each other. And on a casual ride, we can easily ride, from a training perspective, for instance, we can easily ride within the same bracket in a zone.
Right.
Which is actually good,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
then you straight away have a training partner.
Definitely. Yeah, I remember the early days of us, riding together. She on hybrid, and I think you had a road bike by that time, and I
Yeah,
don't remember
yeah,
exactly. And I was on my fixie, and we were riding around the internal roads around Hennur and stuff. And then fast forward a few years, and she was on a road bike. You were on
fancy road
a
bike that
fancy
too.
road bike, Colnago, and stuff. And you were on a road bike, and I was on a road bike. All of us together riding on Old Madras Road as part of a team. And she initial days she used to, these were spectrum zone 2 rides, so called
Yeah,
air
which means
brackets. So which
which
means each of us are trying to kill each other, and racing, proper racing without
yeah, without calling it a race, but
without
like
calling
people
it
are
a
going
race,
hard. Yeah.
going hard. And initial days I used to see her struggle up the back. And there were times that you used to bring her back, and there was times when
Or you or Mohan.
I used to I or Mohan used to go back and bring her back and stuff like that. But within a few months, few years, and probably a year or so, she was strong enough to take pulls, or
Yeah, yeah,
hang on to the best of the wheels,
and also drop some of us. I have been dropped.
so to drop some of us. And I have a feeling that you had a big role to play in that, being a coach for her in
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah, I have actually coached a few people over the years, starting from actually in university itself, because I was the only nerdy fellow who also read all the sort of training plans and stuff like that. And we're talking about, say 1985, who read training plans and all this? But I was the guy who had all these things, you know. So I have actually helped coach people over the years, and like Vicky is the one person I continue to sort of work with. And yes, some of it is my sort of encouragement. Some of it has to be given to the training people that she was working with, because they gave her a really good structured program that really built up her strength and power. But the thing is, like, I think what I helped as a coach was, and this is the thing that you will also have done so much as a coach, is basically, in many ways, what you do for people is not even giving them the numbers and the training plan and stuff. In this day and age, you can even Google that thing.
Right.
But it's one of two things. One is that you sort of do a bit of hand holding, and the other is that you open a door for them and you say, okay, look, this, I've opened the door. Now these are the things you can do. And
Yeah.
often they don't realize it, but when they do, they say, okay, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So just providing that space where they can grow and expand
Right.
is what one tries to do.
Yeah. So you guys riding together, supporting each other, and it has been quite inspirational for a lot of us in the team.
Thank you.
And over the years, we have ridden so many events, starting from TFN, my first TFN in 2011, where Vicki ended up beating a lot of
Yeah, she finished 7th overall. Beat me.
exactly. And we have done what few more TFNs, and we have done Italy. The last one together was in Italy, I guess, right?
2019 in
Giro
Italy,
del
Italy,
Dolomiti.
then Bintan.
Bintan, yes.
2018 you had come.
Yeah.
So you've actually um, and then of course you didn't race then, but we did ride together in Denmark. You are actually the person that I have ridden with in the largest number of countries.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
if you
nice.
think, I never thought of it, but when you were saying this, I realized, okay.
Yeah. I was there in Aalborg when you
Yeah,
guys were there. Vicky was riding the
her first
World
championship final.
finals. Vicky and Rajesh were riding, and you were there to support. And I was in Denmark on work, and happened to
Yeah,
take that chance to meet you guys and ride with you guys there. It was so many memories over the years
yeah, good
there.
memories.
Yeah. Awesome. So, one another thing that I kind of wanted to talk now is, over the years, um, you've been running as well as cycling.
Hmm.
How did they kind of interplay with each other in terms of helping or aiding or like not?
Good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the answer, in a general sense, is it depends. It is because I've recently also got into the duathlon scene. This year I've not raced because I've been struggling with injury. But duathlons is quite a big thing in Ireland, and Vicky's actually racing them, fairly seriously. And you do meet a whole bunch of people, and because it's also segregated by age groups, and the competition within each age group is fierce. I do meet a lot of people, say my age. My age category is the 55 to 59, and just I mean, it's a very Bangalore thing I'm going to say, but like in terms of Bangalore cycling and running, people will particularly understand this. But to be good in my age group, you have to ride as well as Craig, and you have to run as well as Bobby. And I'm not joking. That is how good you have to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to be both. Now, to get to that level is actually surprisingly hard, because uh, for most of us, the thing that is common is that, like, you build your engine, you build your great aerobic engine either way. And in fact, all the different sort of zones of power. I mean, we've only just started seeing power meters in running, but
So just to set the context for others,
Yes.
other non-Bangaloreans who don't know Craig and Bobby, we're
Yeah.
talking about upwards of 300 watts as FTP and probably
18-minute 5K,
18-minute
250 marathon at the age of 55. Yeah.
Oh,
So these are, I mean,
yeah.
we're talking about two people who are not just in Bangalore the best, but they are both actually genuinely world class in their age group.
Right.
And you need to be that good to
do well
yeah,
there
to
in the
win.
triathlon.
Yeah. In fact, like, one of the things about cycling and running in a country where that has a strong tradition of this is that you have to calibrate your ideas of what is good. We can come back to that.
Yeah.
But to answer your question about the cycling and running, in my case, actually, I would say that it's probably to an extent beyond the basic thing of building a big decent aerobic engine. It's kind of counterproductive. If I know for a fact that if I had stayed with, say, one bike ride per week as a cross training thing, and then focus on running specific stuff and strength training, I'd have been a considerably better runner. Vice versa, equally, if I'd just done one run as a fun run with my friends per week, and then rest all cycling focused and strength training, I'd have been a considerably better cyclist. Looking back, I know that I could have done these things. Do I regret it? Not really, because I've had fun. But if I was driven to have competed, and if I really wanted to win a few more things, yes, that is what you pretty much have to do that.
Right.
In the duathlon scene, yes, you can sort of you can find a balance. But like I said, the very best are just another level.
Right. That is true. That is true. And talking of you know injuries, right? How how do you deal with injuries? Having been running for like what 43 years and stuff, I'm sure that you are no stranger to injuries.
Not at all.
So
They're good friends.
they're good friends. So how do you deal with this friend of yours over the
Yeah,
years?
it's a friend that I wish I did not meet very often. Well, injuries are a curious thing. I mean, I like joking that, like, running and cycling is so different. I mean, once you got your fit right on the bike, you don't get really injured. I mean, except when you fall off the bike, when you can get seriously injured. But other than that, not much happens. Whereas running, even gentle running can injure you badly if you're just doing it wrong. And as you get older, the importance of strength training and a degree of flexibility, etc., and just cross training and just building up your body become increasingly important. So I do much more of strength training than I ever did before. And in my case, again, like I said, it depends. For some people, if they do flexibility work, if they do physiotherapy, if they do yoga, those are the things that help. For me, it is strength, and specifically core strength. Like, if my hips and glutes are strong, then things fall into place. But you can sort of get injured. What I'm trying to say is that, like, if you do the right things, you can reduce the risk of injury massively.
Right.
But for most of us, it's much more fun going out for a run or going out cycling than actually doing all this other stuff. So you have to discipline yourself to that. That's super, super important. And you also have to learn not to do stupid things. Like, for example, because I have done many stupid things, I broke my shoulder in a crash a couple of months ago, and I started running too early when I still needed a sling. The thing is, okay, you can run. Even in a sling, you can run. But the problem is, it does change the alignment of your body, even if it's subtly. And sometimes it's, in many cases, and as the same thing happens with the bike fit, especially on a road bike. Even a small thing going wrong in the position, if you repeat that error long enough, for example, if you just sitting in the wrong place on a bike for 10 kilometers, it doesn't matter, but on a 150-kilometer ride, and you keep doing those rides, your body will scream, and there will be lasting damage. So similarly, running like this with a sling, I managed to injure my opposite leg because there was a compensatory movement. So it's things like this. You have to learn not to do silly things like that, and because for the sake of one run like that, I've probably set my running training back by 8 to 10 weeks. So that trade-off for one bit of pleasure is a lot of pain. So you have to learn that that trade-off.
You have to make sure that you don't start too early and
and be very gentle.
Be very gentle there. A similar thing with cycling, right? If you are if you have a niggle on one leg or one knee and try to compensate with the other, you kind of tend to probably make it worse and cause other injuries as well.
What often happens here is, like, and I think it once happened to you, that you have a bike that is not quite the right size, and the frame is whatever you do, and especially when it's slightly large. You had a really nice bike once, Colnago, I think, or whatever. It was a little bit large.
No, it's the Lemon itself. It's still the.
It's actually just slightly. It is for a
big frame.
Yeah, it is for a slightly taller person, right? And you do,
And I had, compared to what the saddle height is now, I had like almost 2 inches more saddle height, and I was riding longer stems and all that. It's a lot more different than it is now.
Yeah, and now that you have a bike that does fit you, it's such a joy, and and then the body does not complain also, which is like great. Yeah.
Excellent. So now, talking about you recently moved to when I say recently, in terms of just before pandemic hit us, right? You moved to Dublin and started taking part in the events there. What are the some of how is the let us before going to the events, let us talk about the riding there and the riding versus the riding we see here. What sort of routes and what's the kind of weather and other stuff.
Yeah, well, it's very typical northern European coastal weather in the sense that it doesn't get brutally cold like say it would in the States or in the Midwest or something like that, or in Central Europe. There are days in January where we are actually only we might be 6 and Bangalore is 11, so it's like not that it's that much colder, but there is wind and it's wet and it rains a lot. So you got to be prepared for the conditions, and because of the wind and the wind chill, you do need to dress warmly. I mean, Ireland is also a place with. It's a standing joke that it has the most changeable weather. You can have 6 kinds of weather during a 100K bike ride, which includes blazing sun and bitter cold. All will happen. So
how do you dress for something
exactly.
like that?
So I actually. I spend far too much time scratching my head trying to figure out like what layers to take, and do I need inner gloves or just one pair of gloves, or yeah. So there's luckily it's expensive, but cycling clothing has evolved to the point where there are things that feel light on the body. You don't feel like you're the Michelin man because you're just wearing so many layers.
Right.
That work in most conditions. I mean, it won't work in sub-zero kind of thing, but in when you're cycling, when it's 1 0 1 2 3 4 whatever,
Right.
this will keep you going. But you do spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Right.
And even in summer, you do need at least one base layer and a rain jacket because it can get cold. But then at least you can ride in shorts.
Yeah.
You don't need full length because otherwise your legs will really freeze.
Right.
The terrain is also different. I mean, in the sense that we ride a lot on highways and on some good back roads here in Bangalore.
Correct.
But in Ireland, I mean, for one thing, you're not even allowed to ride on a motorway, which is sensible. But we ride on back roads, and back roads in many parts of Europe are actually not as good as Indian roads, which is something quite funny to the Westerners that I sometimes ride with who have never been to India, and they ask about things like roads and stuff like that. I tell them actually we ride on better roads, and they don't believe me. But when they come, they realize because we have some actually. When the surface is good, it's phenomenal.
Very good.
Yeah, so we have that that slightly broken chip seal, which is a little rough, B brutal on tires. So I've learned never to ride fancy tires. The kind of fancy tires you can use here, like a Vittoria Corsa or something like that, I wouldn't dream of using outside of a race.
Right.
You just rip your tires apart,
Right.
and it's rough. And the thing is, so average speeds also. Misleading because the effort it takes to do say a 30-35 kilometer ride per average here, you might do sub 30, you'll do sub 30 there because the surface there's so much more rolling resistance. The other thing is we are lucky that we live very close to lots of hilly terrain. There's no big mountains, but lots and lots of 3-4 kilometer climbs, and even more of an Irish specialty. Actually, Irish and English. 1 km climbs, but that 1 km is at 15%. It's absolute leg breakers.
Right.
Yeah, which is another thing you realize when you cycle in different parts of the world. You also start to notice that people are built a little differently. Like in riding in Spain, I've been lucky enough to ride in Spain, southern France, Italy, etc. And those parts, you often see the riders are lean and whippy because they have big climbs.
Right.
And if you a lot of your training is like a big climb, 7, 10, 15, even 20 kilometer, those giants, you need to be small. And then you go to Northern Europe, and even the very good cyclists are big men, really big, big man and women.
Yeah.
And then you realize that size matters for two things. One is that the short climbs, which is typical of a lot of the terrain, or in when you're cycling in Northern Europe, no climbs but brutal wind. It's the raw power that you develop as opposed to watts per kilo that matter.
Right.
And these guys, you need that power. And the other thing is the wind. I discovered recently, I was actually blown completely off the road onto a pavement and nearly into a wall by just one gust of wind. At which point, I saw some larger people cycling in front of me. Nothing, they just rode straight.
Wow.
So you realize that there are different types of body types that actually suit a particular terrain. It's
Right.
not that they are training
got-
differently or whatever.
You got to bulk up then.
Maybe yeah, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But yeah, so the terrain is fairly lumpy. Interesting that there are some parts of India where you can actually ride in very, very similar terrain. You get a lot of that terrain in South Goa. You get a lot of that terrain in Coorg and Malnad and
Right.
near Chikmagalur, Mudigeri, that side. It's very similar. No big climbs, but everything is up and down. Nothing is flat.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
done some of those routes in what Great Malnad Challenge, and
Yes, they would cover some of that.
They would
Yeah.
cover some of those, and some of those in tour of Karnataka as well. That's really, really the stuff I saw in Great Malnad Challenge, or some of those are like this.
Yeah, it goes straight up
Yeah.
like that. Then it all comes down like that also after that.
It is, and we were lucky enough to kind of have completely the roads were being done at that
Oh, so you had good
those phase.
surfaces.
So some of those climbs on the MTVs, there wasn't enough traction to actually go up.
Wow.
That was pretty epic. Nice. So yeah, that was kind of
The other thing I wanted to bring up also is that in many of these places that I'd mentioned when I was cycling, because I think like now I've cycled in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, in Western Europe, and now in Ireland also. It's interesting, which social class cycles. Because in traditional cycling countries, cycling was actually a very working class sport. It was not a posh sport.
Exactly.
So even today, I mean, we're now, Vicky and I, both part of an old cycling club which is founded in 1949. It's the culture is still very, what in India we would call probably middle class, but there it's very strictly, I mean, nobody, I mean, there may be one or two people who are from, a more privileged background, but it would be unusual, which is completely different from the scene I've seen, for example, in Singapore or Dubai, where, people will drive up in a car that costs like, $200,000-$300,000, then pull out a bike that is like $15,000. that I mean, there are people with bikes like that, but one of the things that really struck me is that the people in the races, you're going to ask me about that, people in our club races who are actually pretty good. We're talking about people who ride at about 5.5 watts a kilo. They'll have, maybe a 5-year-old bike with, 10-year-old durace on it. I mean, every component is good, but it won't be the latest. It won't be the fanciest bike. It won't be the top of the line bike. Nothing like that. They just come out there and hit it. So it's a different culture and a different attitude. And in fact, like if you do bring a fancy bike, be prepared for drop. Well, the culture in Ireland is it's a fairly friendly place and people like to talk. So just be prepared. You'll be the butt of jokes. I mean, nobody will be mean to you, but they'll laugh at you. Yes. So and you land up in a really fancy bike. Yeah, there will be people who appreciate it, but there'll also be people start laughing.
Nice. So let's come to the events that you have over the years. So you have taken part in many events here, and including our local club races, bar and BBCH and stuff like that. And then you're taking part in events there, cycling and running and duathlon and stuff like that. So what are some of the similarities that you see, and what are some of the differences that you see?
Well, a couple of threads that I'd like to pick up on. One is that there's something that many of the clubs, for example, in Ireland, there's some of the clubs will have a much more of a structure compared to here, in terms of, also it's easier when there are many more people. So you have different groups. Like for example, your training group for the rides. You'll have a blue group, a green group, a yellow group, and a red group. And the red group will be the slowest, and the blue group will be like almost like national level guys. The thing is, you end up riding in segregated groups. And I saw this in Singapore as well with some of the cycling clubs. That you ride in groups that as much match your ability and goals as possible. So even the fun rides become reasonably matched, because otherwise, what is a fun ride for you may be like some guy hanging on for dear life.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens here with our group rides, because we haven't done any segregated groups. Like maybe 10 people turn up, and we end up in maybe 3 groups, not by choice, but by the attacks and stuff like that.
Part of it is like, I think you had tried 2-3 years back by saying like, okay, this will be the route and this will be the average speed and stuff like that. But I think we're still at the level, at least then, where people are a little insecure to say that, look, okay, you guys are the 32-35 kilometer per hour group, but like, my speed is 28 and my comfort level is 28. Like, can you find me someone?
Right.
People are not comfortable to ask that. The truth is, if somebody asked you, you would fix that up for them, or even say like, okay, I'll ride slowly today and ride. But we haven't reached that. Now those guys have. And that helps in the races. Interestingly, all the races that our club does, during the summer season, because the days are long, you can meet at 7 in the evening, it's bright daylight, so you can easily do a 1-2 hour race. The races are a few time trials, and the rest are all sort of circuit races over fairly up and down terrain with gravelly corners and sharp corners, and they almost all handicap races. So they won't be mass starts. So the handicaps also they kind of make the handicaps through the time trial, and then your starting group is selected. And a couple of things. One is that because I'm relatively better at time trials and then mass start group riding, my time trial performance is actually much better than what group I should be in. So I end up in a group of death. Like guys are way better than me. It's like I just blown out of the back. So like, I mean, I didn't even try racing with them. Vicki, to her credit, hung on and did it, because again, like, her time trial is pretty solid. But the thing is, like, here also the races, again, because in India we're really limited, and this is a problem that goes all the way up to the national championships, which you see even this year. You find one stretch of road, you go up and down that thing. So basically, you can be the national champion by riding 5 kilometers up and down, and basically by doing 10 U-turns. That is all. You cannot win a race in Ireland without being a boss bike handler. You have to be ready to go like 60-65 kilometers down a road with loose gravel and then do a 90-degree turn. If you can do that, then you can win a race. If you can't do that, you're not winning a race. So bike handling is hugely underrated skill here, and unfortunately there's not enough opportunity to develop it. I mean, the only guys I've seen who work on it are the people who do a little mountain biking as well, because mountain biking, you straight away get that, or people who've been lucky enough to ride a few other places where you can do a little more twists and turns. For example, many of our friends in Goa are a little better because the terrain, which you've ridden, so you know that. And same with if you ride in rural Karnataka, what I was talking near Coog or Malnad or something like that. Again, it's you can handle these things.
You can do fast downhills and with turns and stuff like that.
Yeah, and a lot of it is confidence. I mean, most of us can do it. We just have to know how to, just know the basic technique, especially doing it in a group where everyone is going fast. So there's no space for one person doing something stupid.
Right.
So quality of bike handling is something that really strikes you, because there are a lot of
that immediately brings me back to the few club races that I joined while I was in
Denmark.
And these are club races, and you have different groups and stuff like that, different levels, and whichever group you are in, it's the first thing that you notice is the bike handling. How because these are all country roads, and they have exactly the same 90-degree sharp.
Yeah, they're sharp.
Sharp right turns, left turns, and all sort of turns, and they're taking them at
full gas.
full gas.
Yeah.
And that is what,
Real learning.
that is a shocker, because by impulse you are braking and you're going very slow at the turn, and
Yeah,
you're
and-
trying to catch up.
And
There
the
is
guy
no-
behind you is cursing because you suddenly blocked in
there
front
is
of him.
no chance.
Yeah.
It's always at the first corner that I get dropped.
Yeah.
And it's like, so you need to practice that. You need to ride day in and day out.
Yeah,
in
and for
that
years,
kind
and
of-
so
yeah.
so what I did notice is many of the people who are good at races, have been doing it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And here's another thing also. Like I was saying something about how the cyclists from different parts, like like it is a more working class kind of thing, is like there's no sort of egos about that kind of thing. I mean, like even some of the really strongest riders, very chill about, like I mean, if you're not that good or anything like that, then, there's that kind of snobbery which you see in the Marmel world is not really there.
Right.
I mean, of course there are people like that also,
Yeah.
but people, especially if you're part of a cycling group or a club, you quickly learn to, you don't spend time with them. Yeah. So it's a very different atmosphere. What I'm hoping to see is, maybe a slightly better infrastructure of trying to find and develop young talent, which like even in a place like that, which has a history of great cyclists and stuff like that, you working your way up the system can be complex. It's easier than in India, but and a few groups, like including us and a few others, do a lot to find and nurture young kids who have some potential. I mean, you guys have done a lot of that, and just wanted to put in a word for the man behind Spectrum Racing, Arvind, Dr. Bateja, who's really supported so many people this way.
Yeah.
So like that we have a few, but like it's it would be lovely all I can say is that it would be lovely if there were more.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. Finding and nurturing young talent is really, really important for the growth of the sport.
Yeah, and catching them like
catching
fairly
them
young. Yeah.
Fairly young. Slowly, we are seeing a lot more youngsters starting here, which is, I think, as the years progress, I think it'll, grow.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it will.
Yeah, and even if one or two of them stick with it,
Yeah.
that's enough,
Yeah.
because that will provide inspiration for another whole lot.
Exactly. Yeah, and also from what I hear, you say that you mentioning the handicap races and stuff is heartening for me to. We started the handicap.
You had
races,
a couple of good ones.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So we will be, because of the pandemic, we didn't have so many group races and stuff. We stuck to time trials and social distancing time trials and stuff like that. But in April we'll be doing another handicap races, a lot more handicap races and duathlons. Here last year we did a duathlon for giving back, which was a massive hit. So we're planning to
we exchanged
do-
messages just
Yes,
before that.
yes.
Yeah.
So we're planning to do a couple of more this year, and the handicap races and time trials, of course. But I think these ground level club kind of racing is really important, and with BBCH, that the quality is there, and bar there are a lot more events. So all these coming together, I think, will provide more opportunities for these youngsters that are coming in, or of course more Marmils.
Well, what would really help you is if you had because the other thing I wanted to talk about is, like, for me, one of the big things that I did was volunteer at a lot of races. I was track marshal for a lot of things. Then in some of the running races, I was timekeeping and stuff. But being a track marshal for some of the bike races is also a great way of getting into a community, because people really appreciate that kind of stuff that you do. But you also learn a lot about the nitty-gritties of setting up a race, because you land up with the organizers, and you're there from before the race begins to after everyone is finished. And one thing is that all our amateur races is run with a lot of volunteers. I mean, you have to be ready for a very large number of people to come and volunteer. Because I've seen a couple of races where basically it's been you and your laptop and you've done everything, which is lovely. Yeah, sure. Once in a while you can do that, but it's not sustainable. You need help. And the way we do it in our club is that everybody has to volunteer. The entire rota of races is published just before the season, and then loosely they will say like, okay, I'm plugging in these names as volunteers for each race. If you have issues, for example, if you were targeting a particular race that suited you, you can speak to the guys and swap. In fact, there's a WhatsApp group for that only, for deciding, okay, can I swap marshalling duties on that day. But the thing is, there's a whole lot of us, and we're all on the same WhatsApp group. We know what to do. We know where to go. All that. It's, so that kind of organization is super helpful, because it does make the organizers' jobs a little easier. From organizing the race to tabulation to publishing results to everything, it also makes for a much smoother experience for the participants.
Right. Yeah. Definitely it does.
And I'm talking only at amateur level. I mean, we're not going into the mega race types, because that's another ball game.
Yeah, it's like BBCH and bar here, right? More so BBCH.
Yeah, but bar can follow this model. Well, BBCH or even also, but then say, what they would do for the national champs and stuff is a different scale of things.
Right. But how many races do this club organizes per year?
Yeah, so the thing is, the season, because we're actually quite far north. It's 54 degrees north, so which means that, like, in peak summer you have a 16, 17 hour long day. In peak winter the day is 7 hours long, so there's very little you can do in winter. So you do have duathlons in winter, but they start late, so they're in the middle of the day, and most people sort of manage to train either at lunchtime or whatever. During the summer, which is when all the cycling races, so it's crammed into basically late May, June, July, August. I think maybe till early September there'll be races. So literally every weekend there'll be some race, and also because the days are very long, the club races are often, I think, on Tuesdays or Thursdays. And well, there's some clubs will have a race on a Tuesday, another will have a race on a Thursday. So you could actually race 5 times a week, 3 times a week for 3 months. Which is again why, if you see the people who are good and who are winning, or at least placing, they race so often that you really, really learn your racecraft. You may not win. In fact, like, if you race that often, you will have some horrible days, you will have some great days. Each of them is such a learning. One of the things I think we missed out on here is that, like, for example, you have only one race of a type in a year.
Correct.
Like, you'll have one, epic long race, and one Nandi type race, and one crit, which is fine because that's all we had. But the thing is, if you wanted to be a good crit racer, you should be doing a crit minimum once a week. Otherwise, you'll never be a good crit racer.
Right.
So, like that.
Yeah, the number of
So the sheer number of opportunities, and Vicki, for example, joined a women's cycling group that used to cycle on a purpose-built cycling racetrack, and she's racing every week, and you just get so much better, doing that.
All the bike handling skills and the racecraft and everything improves.
Yeah, just and even those little things, like, looking around you and saying, okay, who do I watch out for? Like, who's also sitting back and waiting to gun it, and all that is like, and those things you can only learn by racing. You can't, however much you read about it or Google it, no, it's not going to happen. You have to go out there and race.
Yeah.
So that's been really, really quite interesting and a good exposure. I mean, I just hope we can get to that level.
Yeah. And you mentioned about these different pace groups and stuff like that in the club group rides and stuff. How do they kind of organize? As in, do they communicate ahead, and the people opt to, and do they start in different times and stuff like that?
Yeah. So everything is on an e-groups. It's also usually on the Facebook page for those people who use Facebook. It'll also be on the WhatsApp page.
Okay.
I think they used to put it on the website, which actually, because many people don't use various kinds of social media. So I'm still not sure, but I think it's on the website as well.
Okay.
So the group will be there, start point will be there, route will be there, and yeah, you can decide whichever one you want to ride in,
Right.
depending on what you want to do that day.
Yeah.
Always there'll be a person who's leading the ride.
Group lead.
Yeah, and the group leader will usually have someone reasonably experienced to be at the front and one person at the back. Why? Because and the few bits when you're going through corners or crossing roads, or there's one bit where you get off. In most races, rides, there'll be one or two bits where you get off a slightly busier road. And you're coming off an overpass, so there's also traffic coming like that. So it's always important for the person at the front of the group and the back of the group to look for traffic risks on both sides.
Right.
For someone to shout at the back, like, car coming or it's clear. Basic group riding etiquette.
Right.
Which actually, because we never did any of these things, I said, like, what is the use of it? But then I realized actually when there is traffic, these things are really useful. And it's a good discipline to follow that, like, you have the most experienced riders usually at the right at the front and right at the back. Because the guy, which actually I've noticed that you would often do in our group rides. If anyone is struggling, you're one of the quickest to drop back and like, okay, check out, is everything okay? And if necessary, bring them back to the group.
Right.
So that's what, there'll always be a rider doing that.
Yeah, that is important to kind of to be aware of the group and know who is struggling, who is and especially in the routes that are a lot of turns and stuff. If some people don't know the route,
you can get lost.
Kind of,
And the other thing is
experience being at the back also helps that way.
Yeah. There's other thing is safety, because what apparently people have found, I believe there's some study of this, I'm not very sure, but motorists will always notice a large group. The bad accidents can happen anywhere. I mean, like, you can get lucky, but like quite often a driver may or may not see a single rider or maybe two riders because they, for whatever reason.
Right.
But a large group is usually noticed, and they may curse you or whatever. But like the fact they're cursing you means they've seen you and therefore will not ride into you. So the safety factor of being in a large group that is reasonably together is higher, which is why, again, like, it makes sense to keep the speed and ability level reasonably close and have good riders back in front.
Right. I'm hoping for Bangalore to kind of have those at least 3-4 kind of pace groups. Maybe two would be a good start. 2 and 3 would be a good start, and then keep it regular and disciplined that way.
Well, you had kind of started with that, if I remember, so 2018, 2019.
Yeah. I mean, pre-pandemic, yes, we tried to do that. I think in pandemic through,
everybody,
spanner in everything, but we need to get back there and try to make a conscious effort to be welcoming for all levels of riders, because it's these our posts calling it sufferfest and all these also end up being discouraging in a way, right? For these people, because they're scared of even turning up. And of course, when you don't have different pace groups, one guy, that faster group, and you get when you get dropped on the first flyover, you end up being scarred for some time and scared to join for a long time. So that
it can be very off-putting to ride with a group that just charges off. So
we need to do more of that for our group rides. That's very.
And the thing is, like, people have in our amateur world, people have got better. So like, I mean, maybe not like crazy levels, but like, that level of people who can ride steadily at, say, 4 watts a kilo or something, which is a good benchmark for an amateur. There are many more people who can do that now. But the thing is, like, you don't always realize that it's a comfortable pace for you, but like for someone, someone is just getting the shock of their life, And it's not in a mean or malicious way, you actually, people genuinely
Exactly.
They would be actually quite hurt to realize, oh,
Yeah. So that is, it's important to, when we are posting about the group rides, to communicate this, that this will be the pace. People who might be below can join this other group that will be starting and doing this pace. And that kind of communication, clear communication, and having the right leaders and responsible people to kind of take care of the front end and the back end, all these will actually help.
yeah. And one of the important things in communication is we always say that, like, yeah, if relevant, you'll say that this is a no drop policy.
Yeah.
That, yeah, if there's a hill, that's the only time when you go at your pace, but you wait at the top of the hill. Or if it's too cold, because that is also a problem.
Yeah.
If it's too cold, then you
descend
you
at that
pre-establish
hill.
your say there'll be an established spot where everybody regroups.
Right. Yeah, we need to kind of develop. We are getting started towards that kind of culture of communication and all that. I think we need to do a
Yeah,
lot
something like
more.
that. Yeah, that would be
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Super, Hari. It's been fantastic
Well,
chat.
thank you. I think it went on for like much longer than I had thought. But yeah, well, thank you for having me on.
No. Before we conclude, I want you to give a few tips for working athletes to do well at sport as well as work.
Yeah, I mean, I think this. I mean, it's not probably anything new for anyone, but I cannot stress the importance of finding a balance. Like we talked a little earlier about letting these things overwhelm you or completely dominate one part of your life. It's worth always just taking one step back and saying, like, okay, what is the combination of fun and games and fierce competition and hard work outside of cycling and running or whatever, that gives me the most happiness and ensures that most importantly ensures that I can keep doing all of them. And the reality is that for many of us, and especially this last 2 years has thrown people's lives terribly out of gear. But for many of us, work can be horribly demanding, and that's in many cases that's the one that can easily gobble up everything else. And it's important to just have some sense of where you can draw a boundary. And it wouldn't be the same for everybody. Obviously, there's no one size fits all, and you have to think a little bit about what works best for you. The only good news I can give you is that if you're willing to make that commitment, you will find the time to ride. You will find the time to have fun, and you'll get your work done. It's just believe it's possible.
Yeah.
Because too many people sadly say, no, I can't do it. That's wrong. You can.
Yeah. Awesome, Hari. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Yeah.
That was my conversation with Hari. I hope you enjoyed that. If you are enjoying these podcasts and are finding these useful, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it on YouTube and as well as on your favorite podcasting app. It really helps. Thanks again for your continuous support. See you next week with another guest.